Hi everyone. Today I wanted to cover the subject of the web browser control. Uh, this is one of these controls that's often underutilized, overlooked, and yet it's such a powerful tool. It enables us not only to bring websites and HTML content to access, but it enables us to bring tools and utilities that otherwise Access simply wouldn't have access to. And it truly can take Access to the next level. Case in point, over the years, I've published a couple articles and made a couple demos available to people to show how it can be used to extend and perhaps fill some of the cracks and the weaknesses in Access to take it to the next level. So if we go to my website, for instance, you'll see, well, right now I'm going to just show you 5 different examples of how we can use the web browser. But for instance here, I created an improved SQL editor. We all know that editing SQL in Access is just disastrous. It's a cheap version of Notepad, and until recently, you couldn't even do a find, a copy, paste. As you can see here, I have syntax highlighting, I have indentation, I have IntelliSense, so far superior, and I was able to do that in under a day. So there's no excuse that things haven't moved forward on the Microsoft front on this. Then there's things like improved HTML. Another great weakness. Microsoft, they implemented RTF, but RTF is a crippled version of HTML. You're missing so much in the way of capabilities. So I incorporated a tiny MCE into a web browser control, and I was able to give my users full HTML capabilities. I use this also in an email tool that I developed. So it allows my users to create proper HTML content and then email it. Otherwise, RTF, you'd be limited to very bare bone basics. Improved charting. We all know that Microsoft charting is just, it's a pain in the ass. It's complicated, convoluted, confusing. I don't even know anymore how to qualify it. But with a simple JavaScript library, we're able to take it to the next level. We're able to control the colors. We're able to change accesses and gradients and do all sorts of funky things. And this is just one of many charting libraries. So if this one doesn't suit your needs, well, you just switch out the library and switch over to another library until you get the one that makes you happy. I recently demonstrated barcode generation and QR code generation and how you can save this as an image. And then we can do other things with it within the database if we want to. Over the years, I've developed an article trying to chronicle all the information that I've gained, all the knowledge I've gained about the web browser control. This is probably currently the Bible of web browser control. I don't know any other source that even comes close to this. In today's presentation, I created a demo database that I will be uploading to this article. So don't worry about, copying my content, my code, and things like that. Watch, absorb a little bit, download, and you can get the code from there and review it at your leisure. But I'm going to be following this in a chronological manner. We're going to start from the top and work our way down once we get into the matter of it. But we have to start off with 2 things. We have to start off with the limitations because it's a doozy. And then we're going to have to also talk briefly about feature browser emulation. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start off with the web browser control limitation. And it is a doozy. The problem with the web browser control is the simple fact that it isn't available in reports. So that's a big one. I have no clue why Microsoft didn't implement it. I have never understood it. If I need to display web content, I need to put it in a record I'm displaying on a form. Logically speaking, I'm going to want to do that in the report that goes with that same record. So I've always been baffled by this. But regardless of that, there are ways around that. I'm not going to get into it today. I may do that in a future video. But just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, that having been said, Microsoft is apparently working on a new web browser control. When it will come out, I have no clue. It used to be on the official roadmap. It was already supposed to have been released. It's not there anymore. They've removed it. God knows it's supposed to be more powerful and better. It should be able to handle things like HTML promise, which the current web browser can't, and things like that. I'm hoping it will be available in reports. Fingers crossed, but your guess is as good as mine. Knowing that limitation, now let's get into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the feature browser emulation. So to demonstrate this, in my demo, I have a form called Web Browser Info. Now what it is, you'll see, it's simply a web browser control. So I inserted a web browser control, and then here, if you go into my events, the load event, I'm simply loading dynamically, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but HTML. So I'm using VBA to push HTML into this. I didn't want to have a separate file. I wanted it to be behind the forms, and I can just copy this form into any application and run it. But that's a little advanced right now. We're going to get to it shortly, but just know that that's what's happening. It's a web browser. I'm pushing HTML to it. That's how we're getting our information. There's nothing to save right now. But if I run this form, you will see that by default, Microsoft Access runs Microsoft Internet Explorer 7. And it doesn't make a difference what version of Office you're running, Access you're running. It always, by default, is running 7. I think Microsoft has done this for backwards compatibility, and I think they don't want to upgrade it. They don't want to be the ones to risk breaking things. That said, in my experience, I've never experienced any problems by changing this, by using the feature browser emulation. So, one way or another, you don't have much of a choice. If you want to use any of the modern day libraries, if you want to access most websites today, 7 will not work. You're going to get errors, or it simply won't work at all. So you don't have much of a choice. You have to switch it. And luckily, we can switch it. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have something in the registry called Feature Browser Emulation. So I'm going to show you that in 1 second. I've given you the full key here. But you have to make an entry for the MS Access EXE. So that's the program that's running the web browser control. So we're not making it on a database-to-database case. We're making it for Access as a whole. So when we make this change, any database that has a web browser will be automatically pushed up to whatever we're going to emulate. And when we create that key, we then have to set a value. And the value that we set dictates the version that it's going to use or emulate. So you can tell it to use any versions that you want. You can be very specific. If I need this website specifically needs Internet Explorer 9, well, you can technically use 9,000 as value, and there you go. I don't recommend that. In reality, what I recommend is just go to the bottom of the list and use the 1201 to emulate the most recent version that it can emulate, which will be Chromium 70, I believe, is as far as the web browser control will go. So how do we do this exactly? Really not complicated. We come into the web browser. We go to the registry key that I said. Okay. Current user, software, Microsoft, Internet Explorer, main, feature control, feature browser emulation. And here we have to create a new dword, 32-bit value, and we have to put it for msaccess.exe. And then we have to enter the value. So we double click on this new entry and be sure here to switch to decimal. Once you're in decimal, you put in the 12,001. So that's done. We come back to our database and we launch our info. Oh, what just happened there? It's still saying 7. Well, that's correct. The change doesn't take effect until Access is launched again. So for this change to take effect, if the web browser has been opened, you have to close the entire application and reopen it. And as you can see, we are in fact running Chromium 70. I'll just show you one quick little particularity here. But let's say we open the database, but we don't open any forms with a web browser control. So we haven't initiated a web browser yet. Well, I can still come in here. I could technically change the value. And now if I do it, I should get Internet Explorer 9 because the web browser hadn't been initiated. I didn't need to exit the database and re-enter the database. But that only works for the cases where you didn't open the web browser. The second you've opened the web browser and then you go make a change, you have to close the entire application. So let's, for our purposes, like I said, you always want to be running in the latest version. It's just the reality. This should be automatic. So if we reopen our database, now we check again just to confirm we're running Chromium 70. That's as good as we can do. So let's dive into actually using the web browser control. So I'm going to come back up to the top of my article and we're going to start, like I said, from the top and work our way down. How do we use URLs from a table? Okay. It's really simple. This is one of the simplest things. This is one thing the Access team did really well. They've made this as simple as could be. So let's pretend we have a table, and I know this is a simple example. This could be a contact table with contact names and email addresses and blah, 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 and you could have their website. Could be a log of websites that you like that you have in a database, whatever. But ultimately, you have a table, and in that table, you have a field that has a URL. I want to have a form now that displays these. Well, I created a form here for you, and I've tried to link them, make them logically connect to the web page information, so URL from table. So let's open it up and see what's happening behind the scenes. The form is connected to the table, obviously. And then here I posted up a text box with the URL just for illustrative purposes. Technically doesn't even need to be there. And then I inserted a web browser control, right? I inserted a web browser control, this guy here. In the web browser control, I set its control source to that field, to URL. And that's it. There's no VBA code. There's nothing to do whatsoever. It is as simple as that. You insert a web browser control, and you can connect the control source to the field that has the URL. And then if you run it, you navigate to that URL. It's no more complicated than that. Okay, next, URLs from VBA. So let's take a look at how this works. It's similar to the from table in layout and design, but it works completely different. As you can see, both the web browser and the text box are now unbound, and the form isn't linked to any table. So this is completely an unbound form. And what I've done is two things. I start up the form by going to Google, just arbitrarily. And then I also, to demonstrate, I added that this text box, you can enter a value and then press a button and take a look at that website that will have been entered. So let's take a look at how it works. The loading part. Well, the loading part is very simple, and it basically follows what's on my website. I create a variable with a website, URL, and then the next line is I take that URL, and that's what I push to the web browser control source. And that's it. 2 lines. You could even do this as a single line. That's as hard as it is. How does clicking the button for the text box work? Well, very simply, I start off by checking if there actually is a value. And as long as there's a value, that's it. I do the exact same thing. I push to the control source what has been put in the text URL text box. Pay attention to the quotations. It's very important because ultimately the web browser control source is expecting to receive this type of entry at the end of the day. Okay? So the www.google.ca. So we need to have those quotations. That's why you're seeing all this funky quoting going on. It's there for a reason, and you do need that equal sign. It's very important. Okay? So let's put this into practice and see how this actually works. We open it up. It goes to Google. That's all grand. In here, you can put whatever you want. Doesn't make a difference. Press go, and you will navigate to that web page. As you saw, with the Chromium or whatever emulation we're using, you can sometimes get those type of JavaScript errors. There's a way to silence them. We're going to look at that at a later point in this video. But just know there are ways of dealing with that. But it also illustrates that even though we're emulating to the highest level that we can, that there are still certain functionalities that even the most recent version that the web browser can handle, it can't handle those libraries and it can't handle certain functionalities. And that's why we still have issues with the web browser. But there are ways to get around it. And it, as you saw in my examples, doesn't stop us from doing a lot of things. But that's the URL from VBA. So let's get out of that. Next, content from a local file. Okay. Well, content from a local file, I created a local file. It's just a simple plain HTML page. And let's open it up. And as you can see, it's standard HTML. Now I want to illustrate something that's on my web page. If we come back up to the top, I have a section here, we're going to get to it, the mark of the web. And let's illustrate how this works. Typically when you get a web page, you're going to get this as your HTML. If you download something off the internet, or even if you create it yourself, this is the basic structure, the basic template of a web page, right? You have your HTML, you have a head section, you have a body section, and then you put in your content. Now, let's open that guy up. Okay, so we're going to open a local file, content from local file. And if we do that, you see this notification bar here at the top? It disables and restricts what they call active content. So the web page won't necessarily behave or even load the way you expect it to. And that's where the mark of the web comes in. It was a security feature that Microsoft put in place. And I'm not going to bore you with all the details. There's information on the web page and everything. But ultimately, if you put in place one of the mark of the webs on the page, as I previously had done, and you save it with that mark of the web, it's telling basically the web browser that this is, you downloaded it intentionally or you created it intentionally and it's safe to run. Don't worry about it. As you can see, we need to reopen and redeploy it because it buffers stuff in cache. You get now that the warning line, the warning label is gone. So just with that one line in your HTML page, you'll avoid all headaches with JavaScript and things like that. So that's a really important thing. The mark of the web is crucial. Now, how did I load this page? Let's look at what's going on behind this form. Once again, two unbound controls, so a text and the web browser. And the text is just here as a reference. I use it to load the full path of the file that's being loaded into the web browser. It's just there for reference purposes. And then if we come and we look at the load event, this is where the magic happens, and it's not very complicated. Two things. I'm, like I said, pushing the path of the HTML file into that text box. And then what I'm doing is I'm doing the same thing for the control source. I'm pushing, but with that equal sign and the proper quotations, the full path of the HTML. So that's it. As you can see, very straightforward, not complicated at all. So that's all it takes to display an HTML web page that you've saved locally on a network, on your computer. That's as complicated as it gets. Next, let's look at dynamic content. So this is content coming, let's say, from VBA. Well, if I open up the form and I take a look, you'll see here what I've done. I've done two things. I've created up top a text box which will house HTML. And then down below, I've created my web browser control that will display that HTML. And I created an update button. So basically, I'm allowing you, the user, to dynamically enter HTML, and then at a click of a button, I render that exact same HTML. So everything happens, obviously, with the update button. And what I'm doing in reality, I'm updating the web browser control, and I'm using this in two locations in reality. How it starts off is I start loading the form. I just put a generic HTML template into that text box, just so you guys don't always have to start from scratch. I just figured I'd put some bogus simple code, give you a template. And then I update the web browser control with whatever the content is. And I do the exact same thing with the button. All I'm doing is I'm updating the web browser control. So what is updating the web browser control? It's very simple. I take the web browser control document, I open it, and then I simply write the content to it, and I close it. That's as complicated as it gets. So let's see this in operation. If we open it up, as you can see, I load a bogus template, and it updated the web browser, as I said. Well, we can come here and we can change it to an H1, and then you could do indenting really doesn't make any difference, but hello world, right? And so on and so forth. And as you can see, we're now able to push dynamically in real time HTML to our web browser control very easily. So the next thing, if we look at the web page, we move on from dynamic content, is opening a blank page. Now before we look at the proper syntax, which we'll do in just 2 seconds, what I want to illustrate to you is the default behavior of a web browser control. So I just created a bogus form, and in it I inserted a web browser. And I haven't done anything else. I haven't set a control source. There's no VBA code whatsoever anywhere on this form or for the control. So this is raw. This is how the web browser control behaves. And if we open it up, by default, even though we haven't told the web browser to do anything, unlike your web browser, if you were to open Edge or open Mozilla Internet Explorer and you get a blank tab, the web browser control instead displays an error. And this can cause some confusion with users sometimes. And this is why the importance of displaying a blank page. So let's go close this up and let's go back to the web page and let's look at the proper syntax. It's very simple. And per usual, we're setting the web browser's control source, and we're simply setting it to, as you can see, about : blank. Now, the line that I have highlighted currently used to be the proper syntax. When I originally wrote this article, it worked. Over the years, and at some point while I was developing this material for today's video, it no longer worked. And so doing testing, I've come to the conclusion now that you need to actually include that equal in the quotes. And that's why now the revised version, as of making this video, is now this. So now, knowing that, it's very simple to implement. So we go to load blank page. And I've left that text box there where you can enter a web page, a URL, with a button to load it. And then I have a button to make it go blank. And if you look at the web browser itself, by default, when it opens initially, I have it set to that equal quotes about blank quotes. So it's going to load blank instead of an error. And then I give you the option to navigate to wherever you want. And then I added a button that allows you to go back to blank. And the button to go back to blank is very simple. As you can see, it's setting that control source to the about blank. So if we close out of this for a second and launch it, it loads with no error, much better than the default behavior. Then we can load a web page of our choosing. And then we can just say, I want to go blank again. So you now have that capability of avoiding that default behavior, default error. Very simple. So the next thing I wanted to go over, if we scroll down a little bit, I have a section called Working with the Web Page. And if you're going to look in my code, you'll see this block of code here. This type of block of code it's sprinkled a little bit here and there. It's very important. You'll notice that when you're doing things, trying to interact with the web page, it's always important to use this block to ensure that the web browser is fully loaded and it's finished whatever it needed to do before moving on to whatever sequence of code you want. So we'll get into concrete examples of that a little bit further when we're looking at executing code and getting information from web pages, okay? But I just wanted to explain what that was. So the first portion of sort of interacting with a web page is, how can I retrieve the source code for a page? And that, once again, is not very hard. Now, I found the documentation very scarce on this subject, but basically I found two tidbits. If all we want is what's in the body part, so we don't care about the header, well, then we can use this first line of code. But most of the time I'm interested in more than just the body. And I also want to get that header section. I want the complete web page. And through testing, I eventually figured out that this line will extract the entire web page's HTML. So let's just take a quick glance at it. It's very straightforward to implement. And you come down here, retrieve page source code. And if we look at it, it's similar to what we've seen in other instances. I have a text box to put a URL. I have the actual web browser to display that URL when I press go. And then I have another text box here where when I press get HTML, get the source code, it's going to take the source code from this page and it's going to put it here in plain text for me. So let's take a glance at that get HTML. And as you see, I'm using that code. First, before I do anything, before I try to grab the source code, I have to ensure that the web page is fully loaded. And that's what this is. It's a simple loop mechanism. Make sure that it's done, it's not busy. Make sure it's fully loaded. Then we move on to put in the text box the web browser object document element outer HTML. So the full source code. That's it. One line does it. So now if we take a glance at it, and we open it up. So I've set it here to Google. We're going to load Google. Okay. And now I'm going to press get HTML. And there is the source code for the page above. Okay. So it's not very hard. As you saw, it's a single line of code. But that is how you get the source code for any web page you want. Moving on. The next thing on the web page, and this is where it starts becoming a little interesting. One option is, how can we execute code on a page? How can we perform actions, use JavaScript, use jQuery, interact with that page? And that is the beauty. We have that option. We can do things to the web page that the web page doesn't natively do. This is where we start seeing the true power of the web browser control. Well, we have something called the exec script, and that's exactly what it is. It will execute a script. It allows us to execute JavaScript, jQuery, etc., etc. So let's get into a concrete example. So we have here the execute code, and I've done two. So let's start with the first example. It's the exact same setup as before. So we have a URL text box, and then we press go and it loads it into our web browser. And then I have a button here to run some code and a text box where I can put code that I want to run on that web page. And if we just briefly look at the button, what's happening behind the scenes? It's very simple. We're doing the web browser exec script, whatever's in that text box. So as long as we put in proper JavaScript, as long as we put in proper jQuery, as long as the jQuery library is part of that web page, it will run. So let's take a look. If we open it up, we load Google, I have it by default just pop in an example of some JavaScript where you want, as long as it's valid jQuery, JavaScript. But I just put a code block here just as an example. And then I say I want to run it. Now what am I doing? I'm doing two commands. The semicolon ends a command. So we've got two separate commands. The first one is alert. So I'm opening an alert pop-up that's going to display a sentence. And then the second line is the body style background color. I'm changing it. So I'm opening a pop-up and then I'm changing the background color. So let's see it in action. Oh, there's my pop-up. The pop-up isn't coming from Access. The pop-up is coming from the web browser control. It's coming from JavaScript. And then I'm changing my background color. So you're starting to see we can interact with the web page now. We can do things to it. Let's look at a second example. The second example of what I did here. And if we click on it. So I start off with an unbound web browser. And then I have a button here that's going to run some code. So the first thing I want to look at is I have a onload event. And I'm using the onload event here to go to Microsoft's Access roadmap. Okay, so what I'm allowing you to do is I'm going to load this page. Now, I don't know if you remember earlier, we saw that some web pages generate JavaScript errors. And it has to do with the version of Internet Explorer that's being emulated or Chromium. And this is a prime example. This page will generate several errors over and over and over. And I remember how I mentioned we could omit them, make them disappear. That's what this first line does. I've set my web browser object to silent. I don't want to know about problems. I don't want to disturb my user. It doesn't load certain actions, functions, whatever. That's fine. Just load what you can. So that's what this first line does. I'm turning off reporting. Then I'm proceeding with loading the page. And then I'm making sure it loads fully so it's not busy and the ready state is 4 before releasing the load function. What does the button do? The run code. What are we actually going to be executing as code? Well, this code, if you scroll down a little bit, I'm going to display a message box to the user. We'll see that in a second. I define some objects, just facilitates coding. We'll get to that in a second. And here I'm defining my JavaScript. So what we had previously in the text box that you'd enter manually, I've hard-coded here. And what it's doing is it's going to go find all of the objects with a specific class, so this class, and then for each one of them, it's going to remove the class x-hidden. And you'll see why in a second. The demonstration will explain why I'm doing this. But basically, it's going to iterate through that web page, finding all these elements, and it's going to remove a specific class from it. So that I'm building up that JavaScript command as just a text string. And here I'm actually running it. I'm executing that command. And then I'm just waiting for it to run properly and be done, and we're out. So let's take a look at it in practice. Well, if we open this, as I said, it's going to go to that web page, the Microsoft web page. So it's the roadmap web page. And you remember on this web page, we have to click on each one of these to open and close the boxes. Well, if I click on the run code, as you see, Access will now expand all the roadmap items so their details can be viewed. I click OK, and look, they've all been expanded in one shot. And that's where things can be interesting. I actually used this technique when I did a couple blog postings on the roadmaps to facilitate taking screenshots and things like that of everything expanded fully in one shot. But as you can see, you can run anything you want. Change background colors, change fonts, open boxes, remove classes. The sky's the limit because now you have the full access of JavaScript, jQuery, etc. I hope that illustrates a little bit of what can and cannot be done, but the sky really is the limit when it comes to this because JavaScript is at your disposition now. Next on our list is the refreshing the web page. So we have here refresh command, a method. It's very easy to implement. If we come here, you'll see a common setup. So I have my text box that I can go to, and I put here my web browser control. I added a button to change the background, which we've seen previously in executing code. And then I added one more button to refresh it. And if we come here and we look at the button's doing exactly what's on the web page, me web browser object refresh. So if we come here and we open it up and we go to a web page, doesn't make a difference, and then we change the background, and then I want to refresh it. I want it back to the original state. There we go. I also want to point out that if we change the background, if you're in the web browser, you can also do F5, and that's also doing a refresh. Or you can also do the change background if you're in the web page and do Control F5, and that's a hard refresh. It clears out cache and things like that. So you can do it manually, or you can do it via a command button and VBA. Next, printing the web page. Well, printing is, we have various options for printing. And as you're going to see here, I've got print, right? And if we open up that form, the print, same setup as always, a text box to go to a page, then our web browser to display that page. And here I've added 3 buttons. So far I've found 3 different approaches to printing. The first approach is opening the print dialog, so the one where you get to choose your printer, etc. The second one is opening the print preview, so it's a separate window altogether, and from there you can then open the print dialog and things like that. Or lastly is just send it directly to your default printer. So let's look at the code behind each one of these very briefly. The first one, print dialog. As you can see, we're using JavaScript. We're executing a script directly in that window, in that web page, and it's doing the window print command. Next, if we look at the print preview is using a different approach. And I'll have some links for these commands and options. But as you can see, it's doing the print preview. And if we want to send it directly to the printer, it's this one right up here. Instead of doing print preview, we're just sending the print command. And that's all there is to it. As you can see, each one of these is a single line of code. As simple as that. We'll close out of this, and let's look at a concrete example of this. So we open it up. We're going to go to a web page. And let's start. So open the print dialog. So I'm going to get the print dialog where I get to choose my printer. I'll leave it as the PDF, that's fine. And here I'll do print dialog, save. So if we click on the print preview, we get the dialog, we pick our printer, we say print, and we choose our option, print preview, and we say save. And the last one is send it directly to the printer without any interaction, any dialogues. And in this case, I'm still going to get the pop-up, so to save, give it a name, and print directly. Okay, and we're done. So let's close this out. And on my desktop now, I have my print through the dialog, right? I have my print directly, and I also have up here my print preview. So as you can see, depending on what interaction you want the user to have, you have 3 different basic options. Now let's turn ourselves to really starting to automate things and what I guess is commonly referred to as web scraping possibly. How do we retrieve information from web pages? You'll see my article. I give some examples of how things are done using getID, getTagName, etc. Let's get into it. It looks scary, but it really is very simple once you understand the basics of it. And a lot of this comes down to JavaScript. So if you have a good handle on JavaScript, this is going to make sense to you very rapidly. So I made a form, retrieve page information. Once again, we're looking at similar setup as always. Got a text that gets displayed in a web browser, and then I have a button that when you press it, it's going to go through that web page, extract information, and it's going to put it here for us. So let's look at what exactly I'm retrieving. And click on the details. Now, one thing to know is this is just an example. I'm illustrating a few possibilities. But once again, like I've said previously, you're using JavaScript, the sky is the limit. So if it's on the page, you can get it. There's no issue there. So how am I doing this? First things first, I'm making sure that the page is fully loaded. It's done whatever it had to do to render before we start trying to process it. I define some of my objects. And basically here I have my output at the end of the day that goes to the text box. So this is what I'm building up as we go along. So I defined an object called OHTML. And as you can see here, it's set to the web browser document. And you're going to see why. It simplifies all my code down the road. So instead of always having to put me, web browser, object, document for every single line, now I can just put the OHTML. It just simplifies coding. So let's get into it. What exactly am I retrieving? Well, as you can see here, page title. I can do that directly. I don't need to use any get IDs, get metadata, any of that type of stuff. I can get it straight out of the document. Give me the title. For fun, what's the character set? Once again, there's a method for that. Location, protocol. Then I said to myself, okay, let's see. Let's try to extract the images from a web page. Well, how are we going to do that? It's actually very simple because we can use JavaScript, get elements by tag name. Well, we know that images have a tag of image. So get me all of those elements, and then we'll process them. But before we process them, let's see, using length, that we actually have images on the page. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, go get me all the elements. Let's see how many we have. And as long as it equals 0, well, then there's nothing to report. So I'm just going to say none found. But in the other case where there's at least one or more, well, then we're going to do a for each loop. We're going to loop through all of these elements. Remember, it put S. There's more than one when you're searching tags. We'll loop through them one by one, and then we're going to post the source of that image. So it's going to give you the URL of the underlying image being used on the page. Similarly, what are all the hyperlinks on the page? And it's the exact same thing. We're going to use the get elements by tag name. We know that hyperlinks have a tag of A. We ensure that there are some, so if there's none, display none. But if there are some, we loop over them one by one, a for each, and we're going to display the ref, so the link path. I'm showing the inner text. I'm showing what the actual link text is. And then we come down here, and I do the same thing for the heading number 1, and I do the exact same thing later for the heading number 2. And you can do this for any element you want. So let's take a look at a concrete example of this running. We'll go get a web page. We'll press get information, and voila. And as you see, it is fast. So I get my page title Google, I got character set, the location, so the actual URL. It's telling me here, hyperlink transfer protocol with privacy. So that means it's an HTTPS security, privacy. And we go on, and I get my list of images. I get my list of hyperlinks. So mail, Google, for Gmail. Images, okay, the link right here, images. It links to this URL, and so on and so forth. And there were no H1 elements found. There were no H2 elements found. Let's compare that for an instance. devhut.net. We'll go to my website. Go. And once it's done loading, I'll then use my command to get information. And there's my information. Here's the title of the page, HTTPS with privacy. Here's a list of images on that page. Here we get the list of hyperlinks on that page. There's a lot of hyperlinks. And finally, we keep going down. Here's my headings 1, my headings 2. So as you can see, it's very easy with JavaScript, with VBA, to extract any information you want from a web page. To illustrate things a little bit more, show you a little bit other capabilities, I also wanted to show how we can use the web browser to interact with it and push information, not just pull and retrieve, but push. So I also created 2 extra forms for demos here. And the first one is I did a Google map. And just to show you, I have a table here, contacts, and as you can see the fields here, I have address, city, province, postal code. And then I have a web browser control. And what I've done, if you look here, I'm using the current event. And I build a string that builds off of an HTML URL, which adds in the address to the Google mapped URL. So basically, it's building a dynamic URL whenever you change records. And it's going to display the Google Maps because we're using Google Maps as the web URL. It's very simple, but you'll see how easy it is now to generate a map of any address you want. And then if I change records, my Google map will update as well. So it's that easy to incorporate mapping into any database of your choosing. Similarly, I also wanted to show you an example of a web search. So if we open it up, you'll see here, I have at the top a text box where you can put in a search term. And then I have a web browser that will display the results, a button to execute the actual search. And then here, when you're done, you press new search to reset the page, and you can do another search if you want to. So let's look at how this works. I use the load event to quite simply go to DuckDuckGo.com. Now, if any of you don't know that, DuckDuckGo it allows you to do a Google search, but with privacy. So Google isn't logging all your information. It's just a way of protecting your privacy a little bit. And I go to the home page of DuckDuckGo, and then I'm just defaulting a search term in the text box. Then, once I'm ready, I can press the search button. And what is it doing? Well, as usual, I'm waiting for the page to be fully loaded. I define my objects just to simplify coding. And then with that, I'm going and I'm selecting specific elements from the web page. So I dissected the web page and I saw that the input, the text area where you input a search term, has an ID of search, form, input, homepage, okay? And then I put my search term. But that isn't it, right? We also have to click the search button. So then I wait for that to be completely done. And then I come down here and I found out that the button has an ID of search button on the home page, okay? And I set my object to it and I click it. And that's all there is to it. So we put the search term in the proper place and then we click the search button. So let's look at it in motion. We open it up. It's going to go to DuckDuckGo. I have a search term. You can leave it, edit it, whatever you want. Press search. It's going to put it in the search box, and then it's going to click the button, and it's going to bring up the results. That's how hard it is to interact with a web page. I want to do a new search. I come here, dev hut. I do a search, And there's my DevHut search. So as you can see, you can interact with any web page. And you can post information. So I've used this with some clients to actually, in a database, have certain credentials encrypted, but have certain credentials there. And they can, at a click of a button, log into different websites. So security obviously being very important. Be sure you have encryption. Be sure you have certain measures in place, but you can use it to log into web pages. You can use it to perform searches. You can use it, as you've seen, to extract information. You could technically use it if you wanted to get a list of images, and then you could download those images. You can extract, all sorts of people use it to extract email addresses, phone number, addresses. All these different things are possible. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I hope I illustrated a little bit of the capabilities of the web browser control, and I hope that the demo database gives you a good starting point for your ventures down the road with the web browser control. As I said, Microsoft is supposedly working on a new web browser control that may offer us even more capabilities. I'm truly hopeful that it will be able to be integrated into reports as well. That would be a huge step forward for us. Don't forget my other samples. They also provide a wealth of information if you look at the VBA code behind it. In particular, if you look at the improved charting, I also have here a link to some code that, or should I say a sample database that Thomas Moeller put together. I hope I'm not butchering his name. Which, strangely enough, he was developing a solution off of Chart.js at the same time that I was. I did mine fully with VBA functions. He developed a class module. So you can look at my example, look at his example, and you can see different approaches to the exact same problem. It's quite enlightening. And then I use that in some other examples just to illustrate the same thing, how you can use a class module. But seriously, the best way to get a handle on all of this stuff is to dissect. So look at my demos, look at the demo database for the web page itself, look at all these different demos that I've developed over the years. That's the best way how you're going to get the handle on managing it. It is a very powerful tool. It offers a lot of capabilities. Don't discount it. As usual, thank you for watching. And if you don't mind giving me a thumbs up, a like, leave me a comment. I truly would like to know what you guys would like to see in videos, what information you'd like to see covered. It would help me provide future videos, more content. And take care of yourselves, guys. Have a great day.